Good day, everyone. I am Dorothy May O. Ibanez, a third-year student from AB Sociology,
And I am Hannah Kasur.
I am Ivy Montano.
and welcome to our lecture video. And we will talk about conflict and peacemaking. Conflict and peacemaking. There is a speech that has been spoken in many languages by the leaders of many countries. It goes like this: the intention of our country are entirely peaceful, but other nations threaten us. Thus, we must defend ourselves against attack. By so doing, we shall protect our way of life and preserve the peace. The elements of such conflict, a perceived incompatibility of action or goals, are similar at many levels, from nations to individuals. People in conflict perceive that one side's gain is others' loss. An organization or relationship without conflict is probably apathetic. Conflict signifies involvement, commitment, and caring. If conflict is understood and recognized, it can end oppression and stimulate renewed relationship. Peace is more than the suppression of open conflict, more than a fragile superficial calm. What creates conflict? Social psychological studies have identified several ingredients of conflict. What's striking and what simplifies our task is that these ingredients are common to all levels of social conflict, whether intergroup, us versus them, or interpersonal, me versus us. Social dilemmas. Many problems that threaten our future, nuclear arms, climate change, overpopulation, low stock of ocean fish arise as various parties pursue their self-interest, but ironically, their collective detriment. One individual may think it would cost too much to buy expensive carbon capture and storage equipment, but many others see the other way around. Social psychologists have used laboratory games to study conflict in a similar way to the way astronomers studied the planets and Newton's apple. We cannot conduct true experiments with large-scale social events, but we can identify the conceptual similarities between the large scale and the small, said by Martin Deutsch. Let's consider two examples of a social trap: a situation when conflicting parties are caught mutually destructive behavior, the prisoner's dilemma, and the tragedy of commons. Social trap is a situation in which the conflicting parties, by each rationally pursuing its self-interest, become caught in mutually destructive behaviors. Examples include prisoner's dilemma and the tragedy of commons.
The prisoner's dilemma is originated from a story about two suspects questioned separately by the district attorney, the lawyer who can bring charges against suspects. DA knows they are jointly guilty but has only enough evidence to convict them of a lesser offense. So the DA creates an incentive for each one to confess privately. Like for example, in Figure 1, the classic prisoner's dilemma. In each box, the number above the diagonal is prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner as outcome. Thus, if both prisoners confess, both get 5 years. If neither confesses, each gets a year. If one confesses, that prisoner is set free in exchange for evidence used to convict the other of a crime, bringing a 10-year sentence.
The tragedy of the commons. According to the ecologist Garrett Harding in 1968, the tragedy of the commons is an economic theory that analyzes how people frequently use natural resources to their gain without considering the good of a group or society as a whole. When a large number of people prioritizes just their personal well-being in this way, it has a detrimental impact on everyone, since natural resources become depleted. The following are the examples of the said theory. First is the extinction of animals. Overfishing and overhunting are two instances of people acting selfishly and depleting a common pool of resource. Second is the natural resource depletion. When shared resources are used with the intention of gaining immediate profit, a tragedy of the commons may follow.
Fundamental attribution error is the tendency people have to overemphasize personal characteristics and ignore situational in judging others' behavior. Like for example, Let's say your friend Josh takes you to a party. He introduces you to his other friend, Michael. He seems disinterested and willing to talk to you. So Michael is rude, abrupt, and generally unpleasant to be around. So it would be fair to conclude that Michael is simply not a nice person. You may not see why he is friends with Josh in the first place. Why are you friends with this guy? You might say. On the surface, it may seem like Michael is not a nice person. However, what we have not seen is the fact that his mother passed away last week and he had just been fired from his job. So we are just seeing the fundamental attribution error. We are judging the person without knowing his real situation, why he is acting that kind of behavior.
Evolving motives. In a war, motives often change as the conflict escalates. At first, people are eager to make easy money, then to minimize their losses, and finally to save face and avoid defeat. The same happened in the build-up to the Iraq War, which initially was justified as destroying Saddam Hussein's WMDs.
Outcomes need not sum to zero. Most real-life conflicts like the prisoner's dilemma and the tragedy of commons are non-zero-sum games. Both sides' profits and losses need not add up to zero. Each game pits the immediate interests of individuals against the well-being of the group. No malicious person has ever planned for the Earth's atmosphere to be warm by a blanket of carbon dioxide, and no malicious individual has ever deliberately chosen to cause the Earth to become more or less warm. In plentiful commons, individuals who seek to maximize their own profit may also give the community what it needs.
Resolving social dilemmas. Research with laboratory experiments has identified ways to further encourage cooperation and mutual betterment. First is regulations. If taxes were entirely voluntary, how many would pay their full share? Modern societies depend on charity to pay for schools, parks, and social and military security. We also develop rules to safeguard the common good. Fishing and hunting have long been regulated by local seasons and limits. An international whaling commission sets an agreed-upon harvest that enables whales to regenerate.
Small is beautiful. As a group grows larger, people become more likely to think, I couldn't have made difference anyway. A common excuse for non-operation. There is another way to resolve social dilemmas. Make the small group. In a small commons, each person feels more responsible and effective. In small groups, people also feel more identified with the group's success. There's a gentle stability when the same families stay in a neighborhood. Also strengthens communal identity and pro-community behavior. Communication. Communicating the dilemma forges a group identity which enhances concern for everyone's welfare. It devises group norms and expectations and pressure members to follow them. It enables them to commit themselves to cooperation. Humans are the most cooperative, reciprocally helpful species. Open, clear, forthright. Communication between two parties reduces mistrust. Without communication, those who expect others not to cooperate will usually refuse to cooperate themselves.
Changing the payoffs helps resolve actual dilemmas. In some cities, freeways clog and skies smog because people prefer the convenience of driving to work by themselves. Each knows that one more car does not add noticeably to the congestion and pollution. To alter the personal cost-benefit calculations, now we give carpoolers and electric cars incentives such as designated freeway lanes or reduced tolls.
Competition. When groups compete for scarce resources such as jobs, housing, or resources, conflict develops. Feeling threatened by economic or terrorist threats predicts Dutch citizens increase right-wing authoritarianisms. Even perceived distant threats from another ethnic group's population growth or a pandemic disease can increase people's intolerance. Moreover, not only do perceived threats feed prejudice and conflict, prejudice in a vicious cycle also amplifies the perception of a threat.
Perceived injustice. Perceived injustice is the belief that one has been treated unfairly and disrespectfully, and that one is suffering unnecessarily as a result of the actions of another person. According to some social psychological theorists, people perceive justice as equity. It is the distribution of rewards in proportion to individuals' contributions.
Misperception is a mistaken belief, idea, or interpretation about something. When you think someone has insulted you but they really were kidding, it is an example of misperception. Mirror image perception is a mutual view seen by conflicted people. Example, we are ethical and peaceful. They are evil and aggressive, and vice versa. In short, mirror images are reciprocal views of each other often held by parties in conflict.
How can peace be achieved? Social psychologists have focused on 4 peacemaking strategies to explore the transition from closed fists to open arms. Contact, cooperation, communication, and conciliation are just some of the steps we can take to become peacemakers. First is contact. We have seen that negative expectations can bias judgments and create self-fulfilling prophecies. And we noted how blatant racial prejudice declined following desegregation. If this social psychological principle now seems obvious, remember, that's how things usually seem after you know them. Does contact predict attitudes? In general, contact predicts tolerance. In 94% of studies, increased contact predicted decreased prejudice. This is especially so for majority group attitudes toward minorities. Newer studies extend other studies of the correlation between contact and positive attitudes. Does desegregation improve racial attitudes? School desegregation produced measurable benefits, such as leading more blacks to attend and succeed in college. The evidence is mixed on whether it led to improvements in white attitudes towards black. One study found that 11% of white soldiers in segregated companies approved of the segregated rifle companies. They exhibited system justification, the human tendency to approve the way things are.
Cooperation. Although equal status contact can help, but sometimes not enough. When an eagle was bumped by a rattler, his fellow eagles urged him to brush off the dirt. Desegregating the two groups hardly promoted their social integration. Given entrenched hostility, what can a peacemaker do? The Army's racial mixing of rifle companies brought blacks and whites into equal status contact. It made them interdependent. Together, they were fighting a common enemy, striving toward a shared goal. Competitive contact divides and cooperative contact unites. Does that suggest that desegregation will have a positive or negative impact on race relations? In conflicts at all levels, shared threats and common goals breed unity. Superordinate goals foster cooperation. Superordinate goal, a shared goal that necessitates cooperative effort, a goal that overrides people's differences from one another. Closely related to the unifying power of an external threat is the unifying power of superordinate goals that unite all in a group and require cooperative effort. Are sheriff's experiments mere child's play? Or can pulling together to achieve superordinate goals be similarly beneficial with conflicting adults? Robert Blake and Jane Dunn wondered. Cooperative learning improves racial attitudes. When desegregation is accompanied by the emotional bonds of friendships and equal status relationships, academic achievement suffers. Several research teams wondered, could we promote interracial friendship by replacing competitive learning situation with cooperative ones? Given the diversity of their methods, all involving students on integrated study teams, sometimes in the competition with other teams, the results are striking and heartening. Group and superordinate identities. In everyday life, we often reconcile multiple identities. We acknowledge our subgroup identity as parent or child, and the transit it is sensing our superordinate identity as a family. Pride in our ethnic heritage can complement our larger communal or national identity. Being mindful of our multiple social identities enables social cohesion. In an ethnically diverse culture, how do people balance their ethnic identities with their national identities? They may have a bicultural or omnicultural identity that identifies with both larger culture and one's own ethnic and religious culture.
To resolve a social dilemma, people must communicate. It's the essence of life, allowing us to express feelings, pass on information, and share thoughts. Communication is the best way to resolve a problem within your family, friends, relatives, and even other people. Bargaining, seeking an agreement to a conflict through direct negotiation between parties. Mediation, an attempt by a neutral third party to resolve a conflict by facilitating communication and offering suggestion. While arbitration is the resolution of a conflict by a neutral third party who studies both sides and imposes a settlement.
Conciliation. Sometimes tension and suspicion run so high that even communication, let alone resolution, becomes all but impossible. Each party may threaten, coerce, or retaliate against the other. Unfortunately, such acts tend to be reciprocated, escalating the conflict. So, would a strategy of appeasing the other party by being unconditionally cooperative produce a satisfying result? Often not. In laboratory games, those who are 100% cooperative often are exploited. Politically, one-sided pacifism is usually out of the question. GREAT. GREAT acronym for Graduated and Reciprocated Initiative in Tension Reduction. A strategy designed to de-escalate international tensions. Charles Osgood's GREAT aims to reverse the conflict spiral. By triggering reciprocal de-escalation, to do so, it draws upon social psychological concepts, such as the norm of reciprocity of the attribution of motives. GRIT is a form of de-escalatory engagement that aims to reduce tension between two sides by encouraging them to follow reciprocity norm.
Real-world applications. GRIT-like strategies have occasionally been tried outside the laboratory with promising results. During the Berlin crisis of the early 1960s, US and Russian tanks faced each other barrel to barrel. In the 1970s, small concessions by Israel and Egypt helped reduce tension to a point where negotiations became possible. When a relationship is strained and communication non-existent, it sometimes takes only a conciliatory gesture to begin easing tensions. And that's the end of our report. I sincerely appreciate each and everyone for their attention and for listening. Thank you all. Have a nice day and God bless.